Welcome to the Bear Sheep broadcast, where we talk about building stability, preserving legacy, and strengthening the communities we call home. I'm Kalia Heaven Barak Yahu, founder and president of Bear Sheet, and I'm honored you're spending this time with us today. Today we're talking about something many people agree to without fully understanding the long-term financial consequences: co-signing. Maybe someone you love needs a car, an apartment, a student loan, or even help qualifying for a home. And they asked, "Can you just co sign this for me?" For many people, saying yes feels like helping family, helping a child, helping a friend, helping someone get back on their feet. But today we're going to talk a little bit more practically and honestly about what co-signing actually means, what risks people often do not understand, and what questions you should ask before putting your name on someone else's financial obligation. It's blessed that we're talking about this today because most recently I was talking with my daughter about getting an apartment in the future. And since I'm a lot more financially aware now than I was when I was younger, I wanted her to understand the things that she's going to need to have in place in order to get an apartment, a home, or her own place to live. Some of the responsibilities that come with it, bills, which she pretty much has a good grasp on. But I also wanted her to understand her credit and knowing that if you're going to look for an apartment, sometimes it's harder to get an apartment than it is a house. They require the same credit score. They require the same debt to ratio income. They want you to have 3 times the rent. That's why sometimes many people who come to me and ask for renting, and we talk about, well, why do they want to rent? Once I hear the reasons, I may say, have you thought about buying? Because if you're going to pay X amount of dollars to rent, you may be able to put that towards something where you can start building some equity. But as I was talking to my daughter, now she didn't ask me to co-sign anything. I was thinking about, as she's building up her credit, maybe my husband and I would have to co-sign for her so she could get an apartment. So when I was talking to her, I shared with her, that's something that, depending on how long it takes us to build up your credit, and we're talking about getting a credit card and the benefits of getting a credit card, the benefits of maybe putting her on one of my cards instead. We were talking about her dad and I would have to discuss it because we want to make sure that we're making a good decision in co-signing an apartment. She has to be ready. And back in the day, as I'll say, when I thought about co-signing, I don't think I thought about any of those things. You have a person that you like, a family member needs some help. They say, can you help me? Can you co-sign for me? And sure, yes, I can do it for you. I want you to be able to get whatever you're trying to get. I don't want anything to hold you back. If I can help you, I will help you. But now, sometimes we need to slow down and make sure we're making a good decision. And even if the outcome would be the same, at least we thought everything through and realized the effects that it could have on our situation. One of the biggest misconceptions people have in thinking about co-signing simply means I'm helping someone qualify. And believe me, I have thought that way in the past. I'm just helping you. I'm helping you get past that setback that's put before you. But legally and financially, co-signing means you are equally responsible for the debt. That means if the other person misses a payment, defaults, damages the property, or stops paying altogether, the lender or creditor may still hold you accountable. They may come after you for the debt. Sometimes people think if they don't pay, the lender will just go away or the lender won't come after them. But that's not true. In many situations, lenders can pursue the cosigner immediately once the account becomes delinquent. And the missed payments can affect your credit score, your debt to ratio income, your ability to buy a home, your ability to qualify for loans, and sometimes even employment opportunities. Thinking about it, If you co-sign for someone, let's say you co-sign for them to get a home or get an apartment, and they don't make those payments and then they get evicted, you can now have an eviction on your record too, and you didn't even live in the property. So it's very important to think about what you're co-signing, and it's important for the person who's getting co-sign, who's asking for the cosign, to understand the responsibilities of somebody doing that for you. It's one thing if you're messing up your own credit, and of course we don't want to do that. But there should be even more heightened awareness if someone else's credit is involved. You don't want to mess up someone else's credit who has gone on a limb to help you out in a situation. But all these things need to be thought about when you're co-signing for something. I remember this was a long time ago, but when I got my first vehicle, Nissan Sentra, silver Nissan Sentra, and this is before I went to college, and a lot was going on in my life and in my childhood, but I was going off to college. I was very excited, and my mom helped me get a vehicle. So I was babysitting for a family, and they agreed. I wasn't in this process. I don't know if they just offered, but let's just say for this conversation, they offered to co-sign the vehicle for me. So I got a vehicle, I needed a co-signer, and they offered to co-sign for me. So I'm very excited at my first vehicle. I'm going off to college, and maybe in the hustle and bustle of everything, I forgot to make the payment. And at that time, I don't think the payment was more than $100. And I forgot to make the payment. And I remember my mom calling me up and saying, I got a call from, Mr. So-and-so, and did you make this payment? And I was like, oh no, I did not make the payment. So in my case, I quickly made the payment. I told my mom, I'm so sorry. Please tell them I'm so sorry. I don't even think they made me pay a late fee. I just paid the payment, and it was like it never happened. Now, it's been such a long time ago. I don't know if this was a late payment, like it was 30 days late, or they were just smart enough to keep track to make sure that I was making my payment so it didn't fall late at all. But in that situation, what if I didn't make that payment? I mean, I was already late, but what if I didn't make it? They would be responsible for the payment. And the other thing is, my mom was the middle person. I didn't really talk to them about it. And I'm in another state going to college. I got the car. So if I'm not going to make the payments, how are they going to get the car back? Now, of course, my family brought me up to be honest. My mom's an honest person, so they would have got that car back. Somebody was going to be making the payment. But in a situation where you're doing something for someone and you don't have that type of relationship where if they don't pay it, you can get the car back, or if they don't pay it, you have access to make that payment for them, what happens to you? What happens to your credit? What happens to your relationship with them? And we'll talk a little bit more about all those things as we move through the episode. Most people don't co-sign because they don't co-sign because they're careless. Like, they do not co-sign because they don't know what they're doing. They co-sign because they care. They're genuinely concerned with this other person and they want to help. And often it can be a parent helping a child, grandparents helping family, someone trying to help after a hardship, or people trying to help someone establish credit. Sometimes emotional pressures sometimes cause people to make financial decisions without fully evaluating those long-term risks. I always say, before you co-sign, ask yourself some of these questions. Can I afford this debt if the other person stops paying? Would this affect my ability to buy, and you fill in the blank, or refinance something in the future? You may want to buy a home. You may want to buy a car, something that is going to need your credit. Is this going to affect your ability to do this in the future? If the borrower financially stable right now? Are they? Have they managed debt responsibly in the past? And, I have been guilty of this because even with renting property, with New Canaan properties, we don't always just look at you have to have pristine credit, all your bills have to have been paid on time. Sometimes people need another opportunity. And they may have been, especially when COVID was hit and everybody was losing jobs. And now we're in AI technology time and people are losing jobs, but people still need a place to live. They may have in those interims lost their job, fell behind on debt, but they're catching up. They have a good paying job now. They have the ability to make these payments, but their credit may not have caught up already. So their credit scores may be less than optimal. So we have been in the business of looking at the total picture and talking with the person and seeing, you want people to have second opportunities. If I need a second opportunity, I want a second opportunity or a third or whatever opportunity it is. I want someone to see past my credit score if it was low or see past mistakes I've made in the past. And sometimes that works out really good, and then sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And then you have to deal with that situation. But these are things you want to ask yourself when you're thinking about co-signing. Is this person responsible? Especially if it's your child and your child, do they manage the money they have now correctly? Am I helping to solve a temporary problem or am I enabling a long-term pattern? You just have to look at the full situation and see, what is the reason behind someone asking you to co-sign and what's the reason why you're going to do it. Sometimes we don't understand how heavily co-signed debt can impact our financial profile. When lenders review our finances, they'll look and they'll see your income. They'll look at your existing debt. They'll look at payment history. And they'll look at your debt to ratio income. And sometimes if you're co-signing, that is going to count against your debt to ratio income. And if that person who's making the payments is not making the payments on time, that is going to count towards your payment history. So you really have to be confident when you're co-signing for someone. Someone had asked me before, if I co-sign, is it going to go on my credit? Yes. Now, there may be a rare occasion where it doesn't go on your credit. I can't speak for every banker. But be prepared in your mind that if I co-sign for you, it's going to go on my credit. Even if the borrower pays perfectly, the amount of debt can still affect your borrowing power. So, in some cases, it's no big deal. You're helping someone, you co-sign an apartment and you have plenty your debt to ratio income is great. You have plenty of space to co-sign for them and still need to do what you want to do in the future. That's great. This is not saying don't do it. This is just saying think about it and calculate these things so you make a good decision. It also can affect your overall financial flexibility, even if they pay on time, because that debt is still out there. And if something happens later on, their income situation changes, their life changes, that can affect your financial flexibility too. So what happens if payments are missed? So hopefully this will never happen. You co-sign and it will be smooth sailing. But what happens if payments are missed? Because many co-signers don't really think about how things can quickly escalate, we want to sort of look at the steps. So usually the first thing that happens is late payments begin affecting credit reports. And sometimes a co-signer doesn't even know the payments were missed until they receive a collection notice. or they get denied for credit. And you're like, what? My credit's great. What's going on? Or you see a major drop in your credit score. So this is why it's good if you're co-signing for someone, you want access to that payment portal as well. You want to go in there and check and make sure those payments are being made. You want to know that if the payment is due on the 5th of the month and the late fees applied on the 10th, you want to know, when are we making those payments? Is the goal to make them by the 5th of the month? When do I need to be alarmed that the payment is late? If these are conversations you have up front, then when you're going through that situation, everybody will be more calm to discuss instead of feeling embarrassed and upset, because this is a joint thing now. Even though I'm co-signing for you and I want to, co-sign and forget it, if something happens, it's going to affect my credit. I need to remember. So now this is a responsibility for me too, because financial damage can start building quietly in the background. And if it goes severely delinquent, then now you have collection agencies that can become involved. Lawsuits may happen. Liens may be put on things. And if you're the one who has the most assets here, they can come after what you have because you co-signed this debt. There can be wage garnishments are possible in some situations, and repossession or eviction depending on the debt. Even if your relationship with the borrower changes, the financial obligation usually does not. What if you're co-signing for a girlfriend or a boyfriend or, someone, and the relationship is no longer there anymore? You break up or you're not talking anymore. You still owe that debt. Someone has to pay that debt. And if that other person doesn't care about their credit or doesn't care about the situation, you have to figure out, are you going to take this on because it affects your credit? Here are some questions that sometimes we may not want to ask, but it can be good to ask. And you don't have to ask it this way. Like, these are kind of like really point blank, but these are conversations. These are like conversation starters that you may want to think of. So what happens if they stop paying or you can't find them anymore? What if by you co-signing, you damage the relationship? I've heard a lot of people say, like more seasoned people say, they don't do business with family. And I remember asking someone, well, why do you say that? Because you would think family, they're the ones you want to do business with. They're the ones who have the same values that you have. They're the ones who are going to respect what you're trying to do and appreciate and be on top of what you do for them. But they say, no, well, in an ideal situation, Kalia, that's great. But if they don't, now I have to go to my family member and tell them they need to pay. Now this can, create tension in our relationship, and that's not something I want to do. So I have to think about that when family asks for things. That's what they're saying to me. So that's something to think about too. What if this doesn't go well? Will it damage your relationship? What if you want to buy a house later or buy a car later? Or you need to relocate later and you need your credit to do so? How is this going to impact you? Is there a way to remove yourself from the loan? Can the person refinance you out when their credit gets better? Or can, after a certain amount of time, you be taken off the loan? And what happens if they promise to refinance or pay this thing off by a certain time and they don't do it? And none of these reasons have to be because, they just are upset and not paying their bills anymore. It could be they planned on refinancing and then they lost their job. Now they can't do it. Or they planned on refinancing and had a severe health issue in the family come up, and now their money's going towards that. So it doesn't always have to be negative reasons why things happen, but the bill collectors and the lender, the loan person, they just see the payment needs to be made. And you can tell them these things, but they're just going to see the payment needs to be made. So these are important questions because co-signing can mix emotions and relationships with legal and financial obligations. And sadly, just people saying, I'm going to do it, I'm good for it, I'm not going to forget, doesn't pay the bill. When you are co-signing for apartments, and this is extremely common, especially for young adults who are starting out on their own, college students who need a place to live, or individuals with low credit, landlords may pursue you as the co-signer pretty quickly for unpaid rent, damages, legal fees, or broken lease agreements. So if you're considering co-signing for someone in their housing, you want to ask for copies of the lease before you co-sign anything. And if you have questions, you want to ask them those questions. And especially if you're dealing with a college student or a young adult, you want to empower them. So ask them those questions or go over with them that lease so that they know to ask those questions, because this is also an opportunity for a learning experience. You want to know the financial terms. You want it all laid out too. What happens? When is this late? What happens when it's late? What is the late fee? What happens if it's not paid by X amount of time? What happens if the lease is broken? Do you owe the whole lease? Can you sublet? Because sometimes if something happens and that person's not paying, maybe that young adult or student can move out and someone else can move in. You want to find out all these things. What are the late policies? I think I said that. And then the damage responsibilities. How does the deposit get back? Because you don't want, they paid and they did a great job there, and then it comes time to moving out, and then there's these big bills from the damage responsibilities, and nobody anticipated that, and then they're coming after you for damages. You want to make sure that everything on that lease, everyone understands, and it's reviewed carefully. And if you don't understand or they don't understand, then you ask questions. Co-signing sometimes can be like emotionally complicated because you may hear people say, if you love me, you will help me. I remember one time someone had called me to borrow some money, and I would have loved to help them. But at that time, I didn't have that amount of money that they needed. And the sheer disappointment that I felt from them, I felt so bad that because I couldn't help them at that time was just, it was a lot. I still remember, this was years ago, but I couldn't do it. And they didn't say to me like, if you love me, you would help me. But it was more so like, I've done all this for you in the past. Why can't you help me now? And I couldn't. So when someone asks you to co-sign, it can be very emotionally complicated. And sometimes you may have to say no. Sometimes you may want to you may not have it to do it. At that time, I didn't have it to do it. I wouldn't have it to do it. So you may hear people say, I have nobody else. I just need one opportunity. You're the reason I can't move forward. And those conversations can create guilt. They can create pressure. But you can't allow those situations to make what you do. You have to make an informed financial decision. I have seen decisions where one spouse makes the decision, for someone in their family, and the other spouse is like, I don't think we should do this because of XYZ. Like, in order to make this happen, we're going to have to sell this and this. And if they don't pay it back, or if there becomes an issue, we could lose this, this, and this. And they do it anyway, and they end up losing this, and this. So we don't want to be in those situations. And if we are, and if we put ourselves in there, then we want to be aware that that is a possibility. Sometimes support can look like helping them build credit. Like I was sharing with my daughter, and like I said, she didn't ask me to co-sign for anything, but that's something that's in the back of my mind if she needed help. But in the meantime, my husband and I are helping her build her credit. Because one day, which I've told them a long time ago, one day you're going to want to get your own place. And I want you to be in a financial place to be able to do it. One, you're going to need a job. You need to get an education, those type of things. But when it comes to your credit, I want it to be strong. So when you're ready to go out there and buy that house or get that apartment, whatever those things are, you can do it. So support doesn't always have to be co-signing. Support can be education. Support can be helping them build credit, coming up with a plan, telling them how to help them balance the situation going on. Now, at that moment, if someone's asking you for co-signing and you're offering them help in terms of education, that may not be the help that they need at that moment. But maybe just sitting back for a moment and seeing what brainstorming the other options, that can be a help, because maybe there's some things that they didn't think about or see. Help with budgeting. Help them save. Maybe you may not be able to co-sign, but you have a couple $100s that you can give them to that they can put towards whatever they need. And it could be a loan. You can say, if when you have it back, you can give it back to me, but for now you have it. See, now there's no expectation there. You're giving it to them. If they give it back, they give it back. If they don't, they don't. You're giving it to them. So that way, if it doesn't work out, you've contributed and you've helped, but you didn't put your finances in a situation where you could lose something too. Help them understand financing and how it works. Help them find safer alternatives and co-signing. Sometimes we just have to wait. You may want something right now, and there's been things that I have wanted and I have, needed help to be able to do, and it didn't work out exactly how I wanted to, and I had to wait. And I had to come up with another way to make it happen. When you're going to co-sign, a few things that you want to look at before you do it is look at your own credit first. Make sure you know what's on there, how it's looking. If you co-sign for this, how's it going to affect your credit? Understand the full loan amount. How much money are they asking you to co-sign for? What is the payoff balance? Because it may have started, and some of these loans with the interest rates like 30% and 45%. I mean, some of these loans are ridiculous, these personal loans. Understand the full repayment. Is that $5,000 loan that you co-signed for in 10 years going to be $50,000? Is that really the size loan that you want to co-sign? Understand the monthly payments. Ask about the interest rate. What is that interest rate? Understand late fees and penalties, how they get added on. Ask what happens if payments stop. And understand if there's a co-sign or release option. How can you be removed from the co-signing portion of this deal if you decide to do it? Because some loans keep co-signers responsible for years. Even after the borrower improves financially, you're still responsible for that debt. So you want to know, how long are you going to be on there? I have seen situations where parents delay retirement because of co-sign debt. Family relationships were destroyed. People could not qualify for homes, or credit scores dropped and they didn't realize that after a missed payment. What we sometimes don't think about is life changes quickly. People lose jobs, relationships can end, cars break down, health problems can happen. And once your name is attached financially, the lender expects payment. So as we come down to the end of our episode, there are some things that I want us to talk about that we didn't talk about, like how to say no without destroying a relationship and some safer options to co-signing. But what we'll do is we'll pick that up next week. If today's conversation gave you clarity or encouraged you in some way, we invite you to connect with us. Visit bearsheetcorporation.org, email info@bearsheet.corporation.org, or call us at 844-405-3924. This is Bear Sheet, building stability, preserving legacy, and strengthening the community we call home. Join us next time as we continue conversations that help families move forward with clarity, confidence, and dignity.